Perfect. Perfect. So about 2 weeks and a bit ago, we started this project. It's totally cured on the outside, and I'm pretty confident it's 90% cured on the inside. I was able to actually cut most of that basket out. So I'm going to put my first fire in here today and get it going. But if we think about the earthen oven or beehive oven, it is a demonstration of frugality at its best. So the baker would come out in the morning, kindle a small fire in it. When they apparently a good baker can feel that cob and know that that's the right temperature for bread, because that's your hottest temperature you need. So the bread goes in first, then they would do pies and cookies and stuff like that. And the last thing they do is put a roast or a chicken or a pot of beans. They'd put it into that oven, and they'd close the door and they'd let it cook, slow cook all day. And at supper they had fresh bread, they had a roast for their protein, and they had a fine pie for dessert. So I'm gonna get a fire started in that guy. I got a few tools to make. But while I'm talking about frugality, I like to do things that are documented. And there is no documentation for this, but because they had to be frugal, some maybe wanted to, but most needed to. So the one thing a Cobb oven can't have is moisture on it. You can't, if it gets wet, it's all going to crack and fall apart. So I come up with this system. I had some old canvas, and I made 3 curtains that roll down. And they cover the oven. I didn't have to cover below that, and I can tie off the corners. So they roll down on the opposite sides as well. So again, a classic example of the frugality of our ancestors. Anyway, I'm going to go get some kindling, and we're going to get our first fire in our new beehive oven going. I'm actually pretty pleased with this. I thought about sheeting it all in, like making it like a 3-sided, like a long hunter shelter. And then I thought, well, I don't have the wood, and what would our ancestors have done? And I came up with this idea. And again, not documented, but so much of our history isn't, particularly of the poor people. There wasn't a lot of interest in documenting it. Most people were illiterate, couldn't read and write. And I do go on. I got to get some kindling. This is pretty exciting. You notice down here, there's a number of things I did also once I got the oven done, and while I was waiting for it to cure. I built these 2 sort of countertops where one can actually knead bread and stuff on. So I got a number of tools I have to make yet. I got to make a mop, because once it's up to temperature, that fire is going to get raked out. So I'm going to have more than one fire today. I'm going to fire up my blacksmith forge, and I'm going to forge out a rake. This is my coal rake. So I'm going to make a similar rake in the blacksmith shop today that is used to rake out the fire once the cob is up to temperature, or the oven is up to temperature, and you literally rake that fire out. A lot of people have commented about a pizza oven. Well, a pizza oven has a chimney, and this has no chimney. So the fire comes out, I've got to make a mop. So you have a bucket of water and you mop out that floor. And because it's so hot, 450, 500 degrees or so, that moisture or water is going to instantly evaporate. And I've been told that a method they used to determine whether it was around 400, 450, the right temperature for bread, is they'd throw some cornmeal in on that clean, dried floor. And if the cornmeal turned black, like my steel here, it was too hot, so they'd wait a spell. If it turned a nice rusty brown, then the temperature was about the right temperature, I should say, for baking the first loaf of bread. And I'm figuring this oven, I'm not sure. We're going to find out in a week, another week, because we got a historic baker coming. I'm not going to give out the secret just yet, but this guy is a walking encyclopedia, and he's going to be the first fellow to bake a loaf of bread in here. But I'm thinking I can probably do 7 or 8 loaves, maybe 10 loaves of bread in this little oven. Anyway, get this fire going, and then get the forge and my fire going. Fire and my forge going. You'll notice that I also built a couple of shelves here for the wood. So on this side I've got kindling, that I'm going to use right now to get our fire started. And then I've got really dry hardwood. And I've looked at literally dozens of pictures, sketches, paintings from the 18th century. And it always shows the bake ovens with these really tiny pieces of wood. So again, that frugality. You've got one fire that's going to cook your meal all day long. And you're going to rake that fire out, so it's super efficient. So I've built this one for the dry. I've got ash, which will burn not too hot, but should burn quite a while, long enough to get it up to temperature. And we'll get a little more kindling on this and get our first hardwood in it. I don't want to get a raging fire going in here today. I'm probably going to keep this going all day, but just a small fire, and that should totally have cured this structure. I'm pretty impressed the fact that I sort of anticipated some cracking, but there's some surface cracks, a few minor ones in a couple of spots, but they certainly don't go through. So I think it's going to be pretty efficient. Because that door is reasonably airtight, I'm basically controlling the draft by sliding it open. I want to keep, a fair amount of heat in there, but I don't want to overheat this. It's getting fairly warm now. While that's cooking, I'm going to start or finish a peel that I started last night. I'm going to finish that up. Somehow make a mop, which I haven't even thought on yet, and get the forge fired up and make a rake for it. This is fun in researching this little guy. Like, things have names: a cabin, a house, a horse, a chair, shaving horse. But this thing's got like 50. I can't remember them all, but you got a firing board, you've got a firing shovel, a baker's shovel, a baker's paddle, a baker's peel, an oven shovel. That's my fave. An oven paddle. But if you look at historically, sort of 18th century, if you look at colonial inventories or trade lists, you'll see oven shovel or oven paddle was the most common name for it. And yeah, this guy's just about finished. I don't know if it's I had nothing to compare it to. So when my baker comes next weekend, he may want me to build him another, but we'll see. It always amazes me how effective scrapers are. And something that, like, they didn't have sandpaper. Sometimes if they wanted a fine finish, they would take clay brick and they'd pulverize that down into a powder, and they'd wet it, and then they'd wipe that into a rough linen rag, and that was sort of the sandpaper of the day. But scrapers, like even guns, things that they want fine finish, were finished with scrapers, and they actually do an amazing job. And I'm going to call that good, and I'm going to go get my forge fired up.